In the middle of a huge metropolitan area, a party is going on in a high-rise, and the elite seniors of the city are gathering to indulge in the finer things in life. Suddenly, bad guys arrive, and they fan out over the dance floor. The red-eyed villains rob all the senior citizens of anything valuable: jewelry, money, dentures, and food. Just then, they're interrupted by some of the most misfit heroes ever imaginable. The Shoveler, Blue Raja, and Furious all do their best to take out the crew, but they just end up getting in each other's way more than anything. Suddenly, Captain Amazing arrives, and he ends up taking out every single red-eyed bandit. Blue Raja tries to introduce the whole crew to Captain Amazing, but he blows right by them to talk to the press. On their way out, Dr. Heller stops Shoveler to tell him that he designs weapons, and he thinks that he can help them gain more firepower. When the other trio comes out, they hear from the police that Captain Amazing is the only superhero that the city needs. After getting taunted a little more, Furious turns to address the police, but the police end up getting the upper hand in this instance. Meanwhile, Captain Amazing yells at his publicist, Victor, about the fact that he just lost his Pepsi sponsorship, and he thinks that Victor needs to do his job better. Victor tells him that if he wants big sponsors and fans, he needs a big fight with a big supervillain. It turns out that Captain Amazing has put all the villains away, but he remembers one in particular that could make a comeback: Casanova Frankenstein. That same night, Casanova has his parole meeting, and it turns out that he might just be getting out on parole. Just as Casanova's parole votes almost happen, Captain Amazing shows up as his alter ego, Lance, and he reads a note from Captain Amazing that says they should give Casanova Frankenstein a second chance. With that recommendation, Casanova is set free to roam Champion City. Across town, Furious tries to talk to Shoveler and Blue Raja about sponsorship, and they discuss everything that would make them better. Furious claims that Lance is Captain Amazing, but no one seems to believe him. When they leave the cafe, they run into Tony P and Tony C, and they get curious about why they're back in town. Furious thinks they should follow them, but Blue Raja and Shoveler talk about how they've got their own lives to get back to. As the Tonys leave, Furious decides that he'll follow them on his own, and he rides off on his motorcycle. The Shoveler heads home, and he greets his wife, Lucille, who thinks that his hero business is a waste of time. She tells him that he's a good husband and a good father, but he'll never be anything more than that. Meanwhile, Blue Raja heads to his own house, and he practices his banter before his mother barges into his room. While the two of them deal with their home issues, Furious follows the two Tonys to the Casanova house, and he tries to spy on them from the gate. Casanova greets his guests, and he shows off a bombing that he does at the asylum. Just then, Captain Amazing shows up, and Casanova heads inside to greet him. After a bit of friendly banter, Captain Amazing ends up getting knocked out by some chloroform that Casanova hides in a detonator. The next day, Furious rides to the salvage yard where he greets Sally, and he gets ready for work. Furious tries to sweet-talk Sally, but all Sally wants is for him to junk an armored car that got brought in. Furious almost loses his temper, but thanks to a stress ball, he manages to keep his cool. When Furious goes out to break down the armored car, he hears on the radio that Captain Amazing has been kidnapped. Back at Casanova's lair, we see that he's got Captain Amazing strapped up, and he tells him that he'll be dead the next day. Outside, Furious pulls up to the house with Blue Raja and Shoveler in tow, and he assures them that Captain Amazing is inside. They sneak onto the grounds, but the two Tonys come out to take care of them. Sure enough, Furious and the others get beat up, and they head back to the cafe to consider recruiting more talent. After agreeing to meet up the next day to check out some people, Furious stays behind to talk to the waitress. Even though he tries his best to ask her out, the waitress really won't give him the time of day. The next day, they head to Invisible Boy's apartment to question him. The more they talk to him, the more they think that his power is bogus, but Invisible Boy tries to tell them that he knows all about a bunch of heroes they could use. They head to the cafe to talk about what heroes the Invisible Boy knows about, but soon, the Spleen shows up to interview. They decide that they're going to recruit at Shoveler's house, and they go through a whole list of possible recruits. Even the Waffle Man shows up to audition. After what seems to be a complete waste of their time, the Bowler shows up to prove her mettle. She manages to impress them, and when she tells them that she's the daughter of another superhero bowler, they become very interested in her and her career. Eventually, they offer her a spot on the team, and the team heads out to go after Casanova. When they spot Casanova's limo, they immediately hop on his tail, but Casanova's driver notices the tail that they've gained. The driver decides to stop, and they all hop out of their car to welcome Casanova. They ask Casanova what he's done with Captain Amazing, but when they don't get an answer, they attack the car with their misfit powers and drive off. The crew heads to a restaurant to celebrate what is technically their first real victory, and when they're done, they're attacked by the disco villains and Tony. Just as they go to shoot all the heroes, something happens that cuts all the guns just in the nick of time. It turns out to be the Sphinx that saved all of them, and he takes them to the junkyard to warn them about the quest they're going on. After hearing Sphinx's speech, they decide that he's the leader that they've been needing this whole time, and he takes all of them on a quest to train and hone their skills. By the end of the montage, Sphinx tells them that they have to trust each other as a team, otherwise their quest will fail. It comes down to Furious, who's the last one to join the group in the end. Next, Sphinx has all of them create their new costumes, but Furious has had enough of all of this. As Furious goes to leave the group, everyone tries to show that they appreciate what Sphinx has done for them, but Furious heads off on his own. Shuffler thinks that they should go with him to show their support, but everyone thinks that they should just let Furious go on his own. When Sphinx tells them that they need more than the measly weapons that they use, Shuffler remembers Dr. Heller, and they head to an abandoned amusement park. When they run into Heller, Shuffler tells them that they're there for weapons. Meanwhile, Furious heads to the cafe, and the waitress takes a moment to check on him. Furious asks if he can walk her home in 30 minutes, and she actually manages to accept his offer. Back at Weller's, they get a quick lesson about how he doesn't make anything that is lethal, but after a quick demonstration on what his tools can do, the crew is impressed. When Furious takes the waitress home, he seems to try and ask her for a way to apologize while staying true to his character. Back across town, Sphinx leads all the crew into the heart of the issue, but Furious shows up to talk to Shuffler. In the end, Furious just starts to get angry, but Shuffler simply invites him on the mission. In Casanova's house, a party is raging on with all sorts of villains, and he talks to all of them as though they're good old friends. He actually tells them all that he created something that will bring everyone to their knees, and when someone asks about Captain Amazing, Casanova takes them to simply follow him. Meanwhile, Shuffler and some of the others end up discovering Captain Amazing, and they try to follow his very intricate instructions to the T. When Captain Amazing's instructions get a little confusing, they end up killing him themselves. When they try to leave the room, Blue Raja ends up dropping a utensil, and Casanova barges in with the other bad guys. After the bad guys leave, Casanova finds the fork, and he tells Tony that it's time to get things under control. Meanwhile, the good guys meet up with Sphinx, and Sphinx tells them that they should probably run. It's Shuffler that tries to rally the crew, and they agree to meet at the junkyard after they prepare. Everyone goes home to find some closure with their loved ones, and everyone makes their peace before going into battle. Everyone suits up, and they march straight into the face of danger with their new awesome suits. On the ride over, the crew tries to pull Furious's rage out, but he keeps trying to tell people that he has no powers whatsoever. His doubt starts to drive down into the others, but there's no time for that anymore. Shuffler drives their armored car straight into the side of the house, and they crash the party effectively. Casanova sends all of his guests into the disco room, and the heroes make their way out of the car as quickly as they can. Casanova activates the defense system for the disco room, and we see that it's very effective. It's the Invisible Boy that manages to use his powers to turn off the defense system, but his power doesn't last that long. Once inside, each superhero uses their power to defeat the villains in the most bizarre way, and the heroes manage to stand their ground very well. Even the Spleen manages to knock out people after getting shot in the butt. Buller goes to take out Tony P, and Casanova actually holds the waitress hostage to get to Furious. Just as the heroes run out of time, Furious makes his way to Casanova to save the girl, but Casanova seems to be the better fighter. Suddenly, the device starts to work, but Furious isn't finished with Casanova yet. As he proceeds to beat him up, the device fires and starts to change the environment of the city. Finally, Furious throws Casanova over the edge and into the device, and Buller sends her ball into the fray to destroy the device. Everyone makes a hasty escape out of the house, and afterwards the heroes get interviewed and make their greetings to the public as the superheroes they always wished they'd be recognized as. Then everyone goes home safe. And that wraps up this recap. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this recap, please subscribe with notifications turned on so you don't miss a single video.